This is my pre-algebra course. In the last class, we learned one-step equations. In this class, we're going to learn two-step equations. If you haven't done the homework completely and correctly from the last class, do that homework before watching this video. Now, we learned in the last class that when you see an equation that has an unknown, it's asking you to find the unknown, find the letter. The letter is a number and we don't know what it is, but this equation will give us clues to figure out the number. We also learned that the first step of solving an algebraic equation is to rewrite the equation. And be sure that you line up all your numbers, and especially your equal sign. So that's the first step. Now the second step is to isolate the variable. We want x to be by itself on one side of the equation. Right now x is not by itself because the 7 and the negative 4 are next to it. So we have to do two steps. We have to do one step to get rid of the negative 4, or the minus 4, you can call it negative 4 or minus 4, and we have to do a second step to get rid of the 7. Now most students will say we should get rid of the 7 first. You can do that, but it's going to be more difficult. So you should always get rid of this number first. It's the opposite of PEMDAS. What we're doing right now is we're actually undoing PEMDAS to get to the unknown. So when you're performing PEMDAS, you would multiply or divide first, then you would add or subtract. But now we're going the backwards direction. So we have to get rid of the minus 4. What is the opposite of subtracting 4? The opposite of subtracting 4 is adding 4. So we have to add 4 to both sides of the equation. And the reason we have to add it to both sides of the equation is because if you don't add it to both sides, the equation will not remain true. So we're going to add it to this side, and I can use a different color. I didn't do that in the last class, but that might help in this class. So we're adding 4 to both sides. And what the 4 does is it cancels out this minus 4. And then you just get 7x. You're left with 7x and the other 4's cancel out. And of course, over here, we just have to perform the operation 3 plus 4 is 7. And that was the first step. Now again, I explained in detail, and probably more detail than you cared to know, why I'm adding the 4 on this side. In most textbooks, what they'll do is they'll try to take a shortcut. They'll try to make it easier, and they'll try to move this 7 over here so that you can add the 4 on the right side. Whoops. So you can add the 4 on the right side because that makes it easier conceptually. But I explained to you very clearly, I'm aware of that method, I'm aware that it's easier, and I'm not going to use it on purpose because I don't think that's best for you. Now you can also, I also explained adding 4 down here. That makes it a lot easier and a lot easier to understand. But again, it may make it easier to understand, but it's not best for you as far as your ability to learn fluency in the algebra. So I'm not going to talk much about that. I'm just going to say that I'm aware that there are easier methods, and I'm not doing those methods on purpose. So if you want to claim that that way is better and I should be doing that way, well, that's fine. But I just want you to be aware I'm purposely not doing it that way because I think this is best for you. And one reason is that with this method, when you rewrite the equation, you're writing it directly below, so you can see exactly where each term is coming from. And I think that's a benefit to you. Also, you need to learn how to write things on the same line, and so on and so forth. All right, so anyway, I don't want to bore you with a big lecture about that. Just be aware I'm doing it this way on purpose because I think it's best for you. All right, so now we have to do the second step because we have to get rid of the 7. Now, you don't really have to rewrite this equation as we rewrote this equation because the original problem is here and it's preserved. So we don't really care if we mess up this part because the original problem is there. But in this class, I want you to go ahead and rewrite this equation because it's going to make it a lot easier to trace your steps. Now, as we get into 3-step, 4-step, 5-step equations, you're going to be able to skip more and more steps, because if you had to show every single step, it would become quite tedious. But at this point, we really need to learn the language, so you're going to need to rewrite the equation so we can see what's going on. So the reason I rewrote this equation is I want to see what the result is after performing this operation. So I want this result to remain intact, and now we're going to get rid of the 7. Now, when a number is next to a letter, that means multiplication. When a number is next to a letter, that means multiplication. So in order to get rid of the 7, we have to do the opposite of multiplication. Now, we learned in the last class the opposite of multiplication is division, and we show division with a fraction sign. I know that's weird, but that's just the way you do it in algebra classes. So now these 7's cancel out, and you're left with x. And now 7 over 7 is the same thing as 1. 7 divided by 7 is 1. Remember, the fraction sign means division. So now we can rectangle the answer. And let's go on to the next one. All right, so first step. What is the first step? It's to rewrite the equation. If you said rewrite, good job. And the second step is to isolate y, get the variable by itself, the unknown. It's not by itself because the 9 and the 5 are next to it. So again, your instincts are going to tell you to get rid of the 5 first, but we have to do the opposite of PEMDAS. We have to get rid of the 9 first. So the opposite of adding 9 is subtracting 9, so we're going to subtract 9. And instead of moving this 3 over and subtracting 9 like that, or instead of writing minus 9 down here, which is what a lot of students and teachers are going to do, I'm going to do it in a conceptually more difficult way, but algebraically a better way for you in the long term. And that is I'm going to add the negative 9 over here. Again, a lot of people are going to disagree with that. A lot of people are going to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I do know what I'm doing for all the reasons that I explained, but I'm not going to bore you with those again. All right, so, oh, whoops, sorry about that. I meant to make that red. All right, so we're subtracting 9 from both sides. Again, these are lined up. They're all lined up, so you know exactly where those are coming from. And now you've got the colors to help you also. So now these 9's will cancel out. That's why we did that, and you're left with y over 5. And now we just have to figure out what negative 9 plus 3 is. Negative 9 plus 3 is negative 6. So that was the first step. So now, even though we don't really have to rewrite, I want you to rewrite the equation so we can keep the result of the first step intact. And now we want to get rid of the 5. That's the second step. So fraction signs, we learned in the previous class, fraction signs mean division. So y is divided by 5. We have to do the opposite of division. The opposite of division is multiplication. So we have to multiply both sides by 5. And we show multiplication with parentheses. Now, here's a very important point. If you write the 5 like this on the left side, that's incorrect because that looks like 5 minus 6. In this case, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to put the negative 6 in parentheses too. Now again, I know that's a lot to remember, but you got to get used to it now because you're going to be doing this stuff a lot in upper mathematics. That's just common sense, really. If you see 5 minus 6, you're going to interpret that as subtraction. So you got to put parentheses around the negative 6. Now if you have negative 6 over here, and you're multiplying by 5 on the right side, you don't have to put parentheses around the negative 6 because the 5 is right next to the negative 6, and that's interpreted as multiplication. You can't mistake it for subtraction. All right, so these 5's cancel out, and I keep forgetting to make my colors here. So I'm going to change that to a green 5's. So the 5's cancel out, and you're left with y. And then 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. So again, these are two-step equations, and always rectangle your answer. All right, on to number 3. What is the first step of an algebraic equation? Rewrite the equation. So if you said rewrite, good job. And the second step, what is the second step? That is to isolate z, get z by itself. Z is not by itself because of these two numbers. So we have to get rid of the -8 first. So we're going to add 8 to both sides. And I can just place that 8 right there. I don't need any plus sign. If you write a plus sign here, that's okay, but it's just not necessary. And if you write a plus sign here, that's not okay. That's not a standard notation. All right, so these 8s are then going to cancel out, and you're going to end up with -6z equals, and then we just have to figure out what -1 plus 8 is. What would -1 plus 8 be? If you said 7, good job. Now, a very important point here is you see this negative here? That negative goes with the 6z. So we had to take it down with the 6z. It's very important to understand the sign of any number is directly to the left of the number. That's the way it is in every case. If you want to know what the sign of this 6 is, you look to the left, and that negative goes with the 6z. That negative has nothing to do with this 8. All right? The 8 actually has a positive sign, but we just didn't write it because we don't need to write it. So you're learning all kinds of condensed notation here. That's the hard part of algebra, the condensed notation. All right, so now we have to rewrite the result of the first step, and we have to get rid of the -6. We have to divide both sides by -6. So divide by -6. And the -6's cancel out, and you're left with z equals, and we can just leave it as 6 over 7, and then we'll put the negative next to the fraction line. That's the best place to put it. And that's our answer. All right. So on to number 4. So what is the first step for solving an algebraic equation of this type? If you said rewrite, good job. And what is the second step? Isolate the variable, get it by itself. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides of the equation. And this is what's going to confuse students, this notation here. It's a condensed form of the notation. Don't complain about it. It's difficult to learn, but you got to learn it. So now these 4's are going to cancel out. And on the right side of the equation, you're going to be left with x over -3. And now we just have to figure out what that would be. So you tell me, is that going to be, is it going to be 1, -1, 9, or -9? Students are going to choose one of those answers. If you said -9, good job. Remember, that's very difficult to see that condensed notation, but that's all it is. This is just condensed notation for -4 plus -5. Why do we use that type of notation? That's just the way it's written. All right, so now we want to keep the result of the first step, so we're going to rewrite the equation. And we want to now do the second step and get rid of that -3. So x will be by itself. So this is x divided by 3. So we have to do the opposite of division, which is multiplication, and we show multiplication with parentheses. Now again, we have the same situation where if we leave it like this on the left side, that's -3 minus 9. We can't have that, so we got to put parentheses on both numbers. I know this is a lot of stuff to remember, but that's why we're only doing 2-step equations today. We're not doing 3, 4, 5, or 6 steps. All right, so I'm going to change those to green -3's. And those cancel out, and we're left with x. X equals, what is negative 3 times negative 9? A negative times a negative is a positive, and it's going to be positive 27. All right, so number 5, what is the first step? The first step is to rewrite the equation. What is the second step? To get y by itself. So we're going to have to get rid of this 3 first, this negative 3. So we're going to have to add 3. This is this part that's going to upset students. So I added 3 on both sides, even though it didn't look like I added 3 over here because it's the condensed notation. And these will cancel out, and you're left with negative 7y equals, and you tell me, what is negative 10 plus 3? Negative 10 plus 3 is negative 7. If you got negative 7, good job. All right, so now we're going on to the next step. I'm just going to rewrite that result from step 1. And now, what do we do on the second step? Well, a number next to a letter is multiplication, so we have to do the opposite of multiplication. We have to divide by negative 7 to get rid of the negative 7. And how do we show division in algebra? With the fraction sign. Whoops. There we go. So we're dividing both sides by negative 7. So now these negative 7's cancel out, and you're left with y equals, and what is negative 7 divided by negative 7? Well, a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 7 divided by 7 is 1. We had a similar problem like that, I think, on the first problem. We had to do 7 divided by 7. All right, so we're going to keep doing these together until you get the hang of it. If you want to do one on your own, you can try, but I suggest you do some more with me before you attempt one on your own. Now, what is the first step? The first step is to rewrite the equation. What is the second step? Isolate x. So we're going to get rid of the 6 over here first. So we're going to do the opposite of adding 6, which is subtracting 6. And I'm going to add it over here. All right, so these 6's are going to cancel out, and we're going to be left with 6x. And when we combine these, you're going to be left with 2. So now, rewrite the result of the first step so that we can leave the result intact after the first step here. So now we have a number next to a letter. That means multiplication. So the opposite of multiplication is division. We have to get rid of that 6 next to the x. And how do we show division with algebra? We show division with a fraction symbol. So we're going to put a fraction symbol under there and divide both sides by 6. The 6's cancel out, and you're left with x equals, and this fraction can be reduced. So you tell me, use the fundamental principle of fractions and reduce that fraction, and what do you come up with? If you said 1/3, good job. Because we can divide both these numbers by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, 6 divided by 2 is 3. All right, on to the next problem. What is the first step? The first step is to rewrite the equation. If you said rewrite, good job. What is the second step? Second step is isolate y. And we have to get rid of the 5 and the 7, so we're going to get rid of the 7 first. Opposite of adding 7 is subtracting 7. So we're going to subtract over here, and we're going to subtract over here. Adding a negative 7 is the same thing as subtracting a positive 7. I know that's weird, but you're going to have to get used to that concept. So now these 7's over here, they cancel out, and you're left with y over 5. I'm going to have to move that over a little bit. I want to keep it under the y over 5, but sometimes it looks kind of weird to do that. You want to keep everything kind of fairly close to the equal sign. And over here, this is something that is going to cause confusion. That's the condensed form of subtraction. So what is negative 2 minus 7? Is it 5? Is it negative 5? Is it 9 or negative 9? It's got to be one of those. Which one is it? If you said negative 9, good job. That's something that you learned in class number 2, I believe. All right, so now we're going to rewrite. I'm going to have to move this up a little bit. I'm going to rewrite that equation. And we have to get rid of the 5 now in the second step. So what does the fraction sign mean? It means division. So we have to do the opposite of division, which is multiplication. And how do we show multiplication with algebra? We show multiplication with parentheses. All right, so now these 5s cancel out. You're left with y. I'm going to have to shrink this a little bit. So I'm running out of room here. So you're left with y. And what is negative 9 times 5? Well, first do 9 times 5. If you know your multiplication facts, that's 45. And then a negative times a positive is a negative. All right. On to number 8. I'm going to keep asking you what to do, even though it's going to make you, it's going to bore you. I'm going to keep asking you every single step. You got to know, you got to remember for the homework how to do this. What is the first step? Rewrite the equation. And please rewrite the equation directly below. Line everything up. Now, what is the second step? Isolate z. So we have to get rid of the 5 and the negative 3. We're going to get rid of the 5 first. The opposite of adding 5 is subtracting 5. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. And these 5s are going to cancel out. And you're left with negative 3z. Now that's very important. This negative goes with the 3z. That's a very, very common source of error for students. If you want to know where the sign is on any term, it's directly to the left. This negative goes with this 5. It doesn't go with any of these other numbers. This negative goes with this 3z. It doesn't go with any other number. This positive goes with the 5. It doesn't go with any other numbers, so on and so forth. The negative over here goes with the 5. And there is no sign here, but it's assumed to be positive. If you did want to put a positive, it would be right there. All right, so equals... and 9 minus 5 is 4. Now, I'm not lining up these equal signs perfectly, but it's good enough. All right, so now I'm going to rewrite. And we want to get rid of that negative 3. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing. And I have to divide both sides by negative 3. So now these negative 3's cancel out. And you're left with z equals, and we can just keep it in this form. In algebra, you don't have to change improper fractions to mixed numbers. Mathematicians just don't care. You can just leave it as negative 4/3. All right, on to number 9. I think we're going to do one more before you start trying some on your own. So what is the first step? If you said to rewrite the equation, good job. What is the second step? If you said to isolate x, good job. So we have to get rid of this 7. It doesn't look like it, but the 7 is actually added to the negative 2x. But that's condensed notation, so we have to subtract the 7. We have to do it on both sides. So these 7's will cancel out. Again, this algebra notation is very difficult to learn. So you got to get a lot of practice with this. Negative 7 plus 5 is negative 2. And now we have to keep that result intact, so we're going to rewrite. And what do we do at this point? If you said divide by negative 2, you're correct. Let me write the correct color there. And these negative 2's are going to cancel out, which is why we did that. And you end up with x on the right side, and negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. We have a lot of problems where the answer is 1, apparently. All right, so you're doing good so far if you're sticking with me. Now it's time for you to try. So again, this takes a long time to get used to. You're going to make some mistakes, but that's okay. You need to learn the condensed form of algebra because the condensed form is coming very quickly in your math education. You cannot avoid it. So you're going to learn it today, starting now. All right, so try number 10. Remember the steps. You've got to rewrite that equation. You've got to line everything up. You've got to isolate the x. And when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Add 1 to both sides. The 1's cancel out on the right side. You're left with negative 8x. 1 plus 10 is 11. And that's the first step. So again, we rewrote the equation, and then we wanted to isolate x. So we added 1. We got rid of the 1 first, then we need to get rid of negative x. So you got to rewrite again to preserve the result of the first step. And if you said divide by negative 8 for the second step, you're correct. So now these negative 8's cancel out, just like these 1's canceled out, and you're left with x equals 11 over 8, or actually negative 11 over 8. So if you got negative 11 over 8, good job. If you didn't get negative 11 over 8, that's okay. Just learn the notation, understand what you did wrong, and we'll try another one. All right, try number 11, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. So the first step is to rewrite. Second step is to isolate x, get it by itself. So we're going to subtract 9 from both sides using the condensed form of the notation. And the 9's are going to cancel out on the left side. So you're left with x over 4 on the left side of the equation. And 13 minus 9 is 4. So now you rewrite so we can preserve the result of the first step. And we have to get rid of this 4. That's x divided by 4. That's what a fraction sign means. So you got to multiply both sides by 4 to get rid of that 4. That's the opposite of division, is multiplication. We show multiplication with parentheses. And let me get the right color. So we're going to multiply everything by 4. The 4's cancel out, and you're left with x equals 4 times 4 is 16. So x equals 16. So if you got x equals 16, that's very good. If you didn't, that's okay. You're going to make mistakes with this stuff. Every student makes mistakes when it comes to algebra, especially the condensed form of algebra. This stuff is not easy to learn fluency. So just take it slow. If you make a mistake, go back, figure out what you did wrong, and have a positive attitude about this, because this is some high-powered stuff that you're learning right now. Once you learn fluency in algebra, there's nobody that can stop you. You're going to start accelerating very quickly through the entire academic system, especially mathematics. All right, so try number 12, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Rewrite the equation. Isolate z. We're going to get rid of that minus 2 by adding 2 to both sides. You have the condensed notation to deal with here. And these 2's cancel out. You're left with 5z. And 2 minus 7 is obviously negative 5. So now we have to do when a number is next to a letter, that means multiplication. So we have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. And in algebra, division is shown with a fraction sign. And whatever we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other side. So now these 5's are going to cancel out, and you're going to be left with z, and that's why we did that. We isolated z, and negative 5 divided by positive 5 is 1, actually negative 1. All right, so a negative divided by a positive is a negative, and 5 divided by 5 is 1. So if you got -1, good job. Try number 13, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. We got to get rid of that positive 3, so we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. And this is the part that's going to confuse students. It's just notation. Don't overthink it. The 3's are going to cancel out, and you're left with -2x. And then what is -1 minus 3? If you said -4, good job. All right, so now we need to get rid of this -2 so we can get x by itself. When a number is next to a letter, that means multiplication. We have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division, and we show division with a fraction sign. Whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side, so we have to divide both sides by -2. These -2's cancel out, and you're left with x equals, and a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so we know our answer is going to be positive, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So our answer is 2. So if you got 2, good job. All right, so on to number 14. Go on to try number 14, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Let me condense this a little bit. Rewrite the equation. And we have to get rid of this 2 first. So the opposite of adding -2 is adding +2. We have to use the very strange notation. Again, it's so easy to write the +2 over there. It would be so easy to do that. It was so much easier for you to understand. We're not going to do it. We're going to put it over here. You can't avoid the condensed form of algebra, so don't even try. All right, so these are going to cancel out. You're left with y over 4, and 2 minus 9 over here is -7. And then we're going to rewrite the result of step 1. Now this is y divided by 4, so we have to do the opposite of division, which is multiplication. We show multiplication with parentheses. Whoops. Let me get the right colors. I'm trying to do the colors. Hopefully the colors are useful to you. But I cannot do this because it looks like 4 minus 7, so I can put parentheses around the -7. And by the way, if I didn't mention before, you can put parentheses if you're multiplying. Let's say that you're multiplying two positive numbers. You can put parentheses around both numbers. You can put parentheses around one number, the number on the left, or you can put parentheses around the number on the right. You can do it all 3 of those ways. It doesn't really matter. But when you have a negative, it complicates things. When you have a negative, there are only so many ways you can do it. You cannot do it like this because that looks like subtraction. You can do it like this because that does look like multiplication. And you can also do it like this with the parentheses. Whoops! With the parentheses on the right numbers. So you can put the parentheses on the right number. You can put parentheses on both numbers, but you cannot put parentheses just on the 4 because that looks like you're subtracting 7. I know this is a lot to think about, but you're just going to have to get used to it. I need to make that 4 a... I need to make parentheses around it. All right, so the 4's cancel out on the right side of the equation, and you're left with y. And 4 times -7 is -28. So if you got -28, good job. All right, number 15. Let's do 15 together because this is a potential source of confusion. So we're going to rewrite like usual. And then we're going to get rid of this 11. So remember, this negative goes with the 3z. It has nothing to do with the 11. So that's a positive 11. So we're going to subtract 11 from both sides. Or we're going to add a -11, which is the same thing as subtracting 11. And the 11's cancel out, and you're left with -3z. So this is a very important problem because students are not going to write this negative. They're just going to make it disappear. You cannot make it disappear. It needs to come with the 3z. Notice I brought it down with the 3z. Because if you want to know the sign of a term, the sign is always to the left. So we have to bring that negative with it. The sign is with this 11. The positive goes with this 11. So the negative goes with this 11. The positive goes with this 11. The negative goes with this 3z. And the negative here goes with 11. And if there were a sign, it would be right here on the positive 4. All right, so these cancel out. You're left with negative 3z on the left side of the equation. And now we have to do 4 minus 11, which is negative 7. All right, so now we rewrite. And you can pretty much do the rest of the problem on your own if you want, because the hard part's over. So now we have z equals negative 7 over negative 3. The negatives cancel out. Negative divided by a negative is a positive, so you can just leave it as 7/3. So if you got 7/3, a good job. Try 16, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Rewrite the equation as usual. Then we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. And the 10s on the left side of the equation are going to cancel out. And negative 2 minus 10 is negative 12. And we're going to multiply both sides by negative 6, because we have to get rid of not just the 6, but also the negative on the 6. So we have to multiply by negative 6. These are going to cancel out, and you're going to be left with x equals, and negative 12 times negative 6. That's not one of our multiplication facts, but we can still do it. A negative times a negative is a positive, and 6 times 12 is 72. Now, if you don't have a calculator, and by the way, if I didn't mention, if you need a calculator, you can use a calculator. That's okay. In the previous course, arithmetic, you were not allowed to use a calculator, because the purpose of that course was to learn arithmetic algorithms. The purpose of this course is not to learn arithmetic algorithms. The purpose of this course is to learn fluency in algebra, so I'm not going to bog you down with a lot of complicated calculations. So you don't have to do this on paper if you don't want to. You can bust out your calculator. But if you do want to do it on paper, it's just 6 times 2 is 12, carry the 1. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7, you get 72. All right, so the answer is 72. If you got 72, good job. Try number 17, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Rewrite the equation as usual. That's the first step. Second step is isolate the x. Get the x by itself. We're going to add 4 to both sides. And then the 4's on the left side of the equation cancel out. Negative 7 plus 4 on the right side is negative 3. And now we want to rewrite the second step, or excuse me, the result of the first step. Then we're going to divide both sides by negative 5. And a positive divided by a positive, or excuse me, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So we get 3 over 5. So if you got 3 over 5, good job. All right, try number 18, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Rewrite the equation, line it up. Then isolate y. We're going to add 7 to both sides, and we're going to use that weird notation over here. And it's extremely important to understand that that negative goes with the 10y. You got to write it with the 10y. And 4 plus 7 is 11. Now we're going to rewrite so we can keep the result of the first step intact. And whenever a number is next to a letter, that means you're multiplying. So that's negative 10 times y. So we have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. And we show division with the fraction sign. And we have to get rid of the 10 and also the negative. So we have to divide both sides by negative 10. That's one common mistake that students are going to make. They're going to divide both sides by a positive 10, and it's not going to get rid of that negative. All right, so you're left with y equals negative 11 over 10. So if you got negative 11 over 10, good job. All right, try, well actually 19, it looks like something different is going to happen with 19. So let's do 19 together. We're going to start by rewriting, of course. And then the first step is we're going to get rid of that 6. So we're going to subtract 6. Everything is normal up to this point. And then we're going to be left with negative y over 5. And 4 on the left side. But here's where things are a little different. We have a fraction and we have the negative right to the left of it. That negative is right, it's level with the fraction line. So we haven't really seen that yet. In the previous problems, that negative was down here. But now it's level with the fraction sign. But we still need to get rid of that negative. So what you can do is you can just consider that negative to be right next to the 5. And what that means is we need to get rid of the dividing by negative 5, so we have to multiply by negative 5, because that's the opposite of dividing by negative 5. Now, you can keep the negative up here if you want. You know, the negative 5s are just going to, they're going to cancel out. But if it's confusing to you, you can put it down here also. But you can't put negatives on both these because then that would be a double negative and it would become a positive. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. All right, so 20 is a similar problem. So why don't you try number 20? You have the same situation with the negative next to the fraction sign, but again, you can just take that negative and put it down here if it's confusing you. So go and attempt number 20, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. First step is to add 6 to both sides. And these 6's cancel out, and be aware that that negative, it goes with the x over 2. It's such a large source of problems for students there. 5 plus 6 is 11. And again, you can take this negative and put it down on the 2 if you want to. One reason to do that is because we have to get rid of this dividing by negative 2. So we have to multiply both sides by negative 2 with parentheses. But if we just write negative 2 in parentheses, it looks like we're subtracting the x minus 2. So then we have to put parentheses around the negative x over 2 also. That's another source of confusion. These are all things that you need to get used to. All right, so the negative 2's cancel out, and you're left with x, and 11 times negative 2 is negative 22. So if you got negative 22, good job. All right. So on to 21. Go ahead and attempt 21, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Rewrite the equation. Isolate z, and we're going to have to subtract 4 from both sides. On the right side, the 4's cancel out, but please understand that that negative does not cancel out. It goes with the z over 2, and negative 4 minus 1 is negative 5. And so now we have the same situation where this negative is not down in the 2. So this time I'm just going to place it down near the 2 just so you can see that it might be easier to understand the problem. And now, of course, we multiply both sides by -2. But again, you have that problem. It looks like -2 minus 5. So you gotta put the -5 in parentheses. Now, one way to avoid that I didn't mention is you can switch these around. You can put the -5 here and -2 there, and that solves all the problems. But it makes it confusing to follow what exactly is happening as far as the order of things, so I'm not going to do it that way. So that's the way I want you to do it. And we get z on the right side and 10 on the left side. So if you got 10, wait a second, that's not correct. We did something wrong here. Actually, no, that is correct. All right, on to number 22. Go and attempt number 22. That's a similar problem. And when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Rewrite the problem. And we're going to add 3 to both sides. These 3's cancel out, but please understand that that negative goes with the x over 8. -7 plus 3 is -4. And again, the way that you know that that negative goes with the x over 8 is the sign of any term is to the left of that term. So that negative has to go with the x over 8. These 3's over here have nothing to do with this negative. All right, so now we need to get rid of the -8. Again, if you're confused by that negative there, you can just move it down to the 8, and that might be a lot easier. So now we multiply both sides by -8. And because that negative is down here, that makes it to where we actually don't have to write parentheses around the x over 8. So many things to think about when you're doing this algebra notation. I can cherry pick these problems. I can make them to where you would never get confused by the notation by using a notation that is cherry picked to make sure that you don't have any problems. But that might be easy in the short term, but in the long term it's going to be a huge problem. So you need to jump right into the deep end with this condensed form of notation and all these different complexities right now. That's the purpose of this class, the previous class, and the next couple classes. So if you're a parent or a teacher, don't complain about this. You have to do it this way to learn fluency in algebra. This stuff is coming one way or the other, so you got to get used to it now. All right, the -8's cancel out, and -4 times -8 is 32. So if you got 32, good job. All right, now 23 is going to be something slightly different, so we need to do 23 together. So go ahead and rewrite the problem as usual and isolate x as usual. So we're going to have to subtract 7 from both sides. And these 7's are going to cancel out. And you're left with -x. Now again, that negative goes with the x. Don't drop off that negative. 9 minus 7 is 2. So this is the part that's different. A lot of students would stop at this point and they'd say, I've solved the problem. It's 2. That's the answer. That's not the answer. And the problem is we're looking for x. We have not found x. We've found -x. Negative x is equal to 2. We don't want -x. We want x. So the reason that this is confusing is because there is a number that's multiplied into x. But because that number is 1, the 1 is not written. It's just written as -x. If you wanted to write the 1, it would look like this. But again, when you have a 1 as a coefficient, and coefficient, we didn't talk about that much, but the coefficients of the terms are the numbers that are right next to the letters. If the coefficient is 1, then typically mathematicians just don't write the 1. They just write it as -x. That's something that's extremely important. You're going to be very confused if you don't understand that. So we can just assume this to be negative 1. So when I rewrite it, I'm going to write it as negative 1x. And now this number is multiplied. Negative 1 is multiplied into x because it's right next to x. Let me rewrite that so it doesn't look like a 7. So now we have to divide to get rid of the negative 1. And we show division with the fraction sign. So that's going to cancel these out. You're going to be left with x. And 2 divided by 1 is 2. And a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So our answer would not be positive 2, it would be negative 2. So again, that's a lot to think about, but that's just something that you're going to have to remember when you do the homework. When you see a negative in front of an x like that, the coefficient is negative 1. So now 24 is going to be a similar problem. So why don't you try 24, and I'm going to keep 23 in the screen here, and you can use this if you get stuck. Attempt 24, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. So rewrite the problem. Get y by itself. Subtract 4 from both sides of the equation. 4's cancel out on the right side of the equation, and that negative goes with the y. And negative 4 plus 12 is 8. So here's where the confusion comes in. This is not the answer. We have to get rid of that negative on the y. So that's considered to be the same thing as negative 1y. It's just a condensed notation. So when a number is next to a letter, the number's multiplied into the letters. That's negative 1 times y. The opposite of multiplication is division. We show division with a fraction sign. And whatever we do to one side of the equation, we have to do the other side of the equation. So now we have y is equal to 8 divided by 1 is 8. And a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So our final answer is negative 8. So if you got negative 8, good job. So now we have 6 more problems. These last problems are just slight variations of the problems that we did before. Actually, these are pretty much the same problems that we just did. So again, you have your negative in front of the variable. So go ahead and attempt 25, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Rewrite. Subtract 9 from both sides. The 9's cancel out on the left. 6 minus 9 is negative 3. And we're going to rewrite the result that we got from step number 1. But this time we're going to write it as negative 1x. And then you're going to divide by negative 1x, or excuse me, negative 1, not negative 1x. And you're left with x equals negative 3. So if you got negative 3, very good. Actually, negative 3 cannot be the answer. I must have done something wrong. Let's see here. What did I do wrong? Oh, that's what I did wrong. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. See? You can make mistakes. That's okay as long as you catch it or go back and figure out what you did wrong. All right, so remember when you do the homework, I'm going to give you the answers. So you're going to know that you did something wrong. Go back and figure out what you did. All right, so on to 26. I'm going to leave 25 in the frame there so you can see. Attempt 26, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Rewrite the problem. And we're going to add 10 to both sides to get rid of that 10. And then we're left with negative y. Again, that negative goes with the y. And now when we rewrite, I'm going to write this as negative 1y. And then we're going to divide both sides. We have to get rid of that negative 1. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 1. And we're left with y equals negative 14. So if you got negative 14, good job. All right, so for 27, something different is going to happen. We'll do this one together. You'll see what's going to happen. So let's rewrite as usual. And we're going to subtract 7 from both sides. And these 7s are going to cancel out, so you're left with 4x. And look what happens when these 7s cancel out. Something special is going to happen. What's negative 7 plus 7? Negative 7 plus 7 is 0. So now we haven't found x yet. We found 4x, so we still have to do the last step. And this is where things get a little different. We have to get rid of that 4. So like we did in the previous problems, we have to divide by 4, and we show division with a fraction sign in algebra. So the 4's cancel out, you're left with x, and here's the different part. What is 0 divided by 4? Now we learned that in the last class. Whenever you have 0 in the numerator, the fraction is just 0. You can just reduce it to 0. Because think about it, if you cut a pizza into 4 parts, and you eat all of the parts so that there's no parts left, you take those all away, then what do you have? You have 0 out of 4, which is nothing. All the pizza's gone. It's 0. So that's why 0 over 4 is interpreted as 0. All right, so number 28 is going to be similar to that problem. So why don't you try number 28, and I'll keep 27 in the frame, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. First step always is rewrite the equation. Second step is to isolate the z. We did the first step there, and these 6's are going to cancel out, and we're left with negative 3z, and remember that negative goes with the 3z. And we get 0 over here. So we then have to, as usual, let me move that down a little bit. As usual, we're going to have to rewrite. So we keep the result of the first step. And now we're going to have to get rid of the negative 3, so we divide by negative 3. And the negative 3's cancel out on the left side, and 0 divided by negative 3 is just 0. In case you're wondering, if you have negative 3 and you divide it by 0, that would actually be undefined. We won't talk about that now, but that would be undefined. I think we learned that in the last course. All right. So number 29 is similar to the two problems we just did, so go ahead and try 29, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. So rewrite, and then we're going to add 1 to both sides. And we get, whoops, I'm going to move that down a little bit. We get the following, and then we have to rewrite again. We should probably move these a little closer, even though we want to keep them lined up if we can, but sometimes it looks a little weird if you keep them spaced out that much. They got to be somewhere close to the equal sign. All right, so now we multiply both sides by negative 5. And we end up with y equals, and what is 0 times a number? 0 times any number we learned in the previous course is 0. If you multiply any number times 0, you get 0. So if you got y equals 0, good job. If you didn't, that's okay. You got to learn it step by step. All right, so try number 30, and when you come back, we'll do it together. All right, we're back. Rewrite, add 8 to both sides, and this is going to cause confusion. That's the condensed form. And we have z over 2 on the right side and 0 on the left side. So now we have to rewrite, keep the result of the first step intact. And this is z divided by 2, so we have to get rid of that 2 by doing the opposite of division, which is multiplication, and we show multiplication with parentheses in algebra. These cancel out, and you're left with z, and 0 times 2 is 0. So z is 0. So for all these problems, all 4 of these problems, there were just special cases where the answer ended up being 0. So if you got 0 for 30, good job. So that was today's class. I'm proud of you for staying with me there. This is the work that we did today. If you want to take screenshots of these pages, you can use them to help you with your homework and also to study for tests. So you can put these pages in your notes, take a screenshot of that page, and a screenshot of this page, and a screenshot of the last page. And again, having these screenshots will be a huge help when it comes to doing your homework and studying for tests. So now we're going to look at the homework. Remember, the homework is the most important part of the course. If you don't do the homework, I guarantee you that you'll learn nothing. So here's the homework. Take a screenshot, and you've got all the answers. The most important thing when you do the homework is to show your work. I want you to show your work exactly the way that I showed the work when we did these problems. I want you to rewrite the original equation. That's this part here. I want you to rewrite with the result after the first step, which is here. I want you to rectangle the answer. I want you to number the problems, just like we do in all the classes in my previous course. The purpose of all of this class is to learn the language of algebra, which is writing and reading the math. So that's the purpose of this class. So you got to show all this work properly. If you don't show it properly, then you're just wasting your time. Now, again, you have to check your answer, and if you see something that doesn't look right, that's okay. You're going to make mistakes with this. Learning the language of algebra is not easy. So you're going to make mistakes. That's okay. Just go back and figure out what you did wrong. And I'll see you in the next class.